somewhere deep in the Ozark Mountains, past roads that don't show up on any map, a farmhouse sits on a hill. Every window sealed with steel, every door reinforced, cameras blinking red in the dark. Inside, the walls are covered with photographs, hundreds of them. A woman at a grocery store, a little girl on a swing, taken from a distance, dated, organized. Years of watching, years of waiting. In the basement, a briefcase full of cash, a handwritten letter, and a secret worth more than $100 million. The man who built this place is dead. He left no instructions, no explanation. Only a Bible with a broken spine and a truth hidden inside that someone will kill to keep buried. Tonight, headlights cut through the trees, 2 black SUVs, men in tactical gear, and a billionaire who has come to collect what he believes is his. He doesn't know she's already inside. He doesn't know she found the letter. And he doesn't know that the trembling woman in the dark has her finger on a switch that will change everything. You should have just taken the 30 grand. His voice came down the stairs like something rotting, slow, familiar, dripping with that same manufactured sweetness he used to whisper into her ear at night when he still needed her to believe him. Marcus Webb, her ex-husband, the man who once promised her forever over a plate of cold spaghetti in a studio apartment they could barely afford. Now he was descending into the basement of a dead man's farmhouse. Heavy boots, slow steps, each one echoing off concrete walls like a countdown to something neither of them could take back. He thought he was cornering a helpless single mother. He thought she had nowhere left to run, which was funny, because Elena Carter's trembling hand was already hovering over the lockdown switch, and she wasn't running anywhere. Not this time. But we need to go back, a few weeks back, to the moment everything cracked open. Midnight, Chicago. The apartment smelled like cardboard and failure. Elena sat on the bare hardwood floor, cross-legged, surrounded by half-packed boxes she didn't have the energy to finish. The overhead light had burned out 2 weeks ago, and she couldn't afford a replacement bulb, so the only light came from the street lamps outside. Orange, flickering, casting long shadows across walls that would belong to someone else in 14 days. 14 days. That was the number on the eviction notice taped to her front door. 14 days to vacate because she'd missed 3 months of rent. Because Marcus had drained the savings account 6 days before the divorce was finalized. Because her lawyer had charged her $11,000 to lose. 34 years old. And she was sitting on a floor that wasn't hers anymore, counting the things she had left. Primary custody of Sophie, that was one. A rusted 2009 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield, that was 2. $47 in a checking account that used to hold their entire future. That was 3. And this last plastic tote shoved against the wall, the remnants of her father's life, everything Henry Carter had left behind when his heart stopped 6 months ago in the middle of a Tuesday night shift at the sheet metal factory where he'd worked for 35 years. The factory called her at 3 a.m. A supervisor she'd never met, voice flat and professional like he'd made this call before. Your father collapsed at his station. Paramedics couldn't revive him. We're very sorry for your loss. That was it. 35 years of showing up, of grinding through graveyard shifts, of wearing the same 3 flannel shirts until the elbows gave out, and the summary of Henry Carter's life fit into 1 phone call and a plastic tote that smelled like Old Spice and peppermint wrappers. Elena pulled the tote toward her. She hadn't opened it since the funeral. Couldn't. Every time she tried, her chest would tighten and her vision would blur, and she'd shove it back into whatever corner was closest. But tonight was different. Tonight she was out of corners. She pried the lid off. The smell hit her first. Old Spice, peppermint, and something else underneath old paper, the kind that yellows and curls at the edges, the kind that holds things people don't want found. Inside, his reading glasses, 1 lens cracked. A handful of rusted pocket knives he used to sharpen on Sunday mornings while listening to gospel radio. A stack of crossword puzzle books, half-finished pen marks in the margins where he'd argue with himself about 7-letter words. And his Bible. Elena lifted it out carefully. The thing was massive. King James gold-leafed edges leather cover worn to a buttery smoothness from decades of his rough hands gripping it every single night before bed. He wasn't a man who talked about faith, never preached, never quoted scripture at dinner. But every night, without exception, he sat in his recliner, opened this book and read in silence for exactly 30 minutes. She ran her fingers over the faded gold lettering on the cover, and the grief hit her. Not the gentle kind. The kind that pulls you under and fills your lungs before you can even think about breathing. She missed him. She missed him so much it felt physical, like someone had reached into her chest and squeezed. She missed the way he'd answer the phone on the first ring whenever she called. The way he never asked why she was crying, just waited patient until she was ready to talk. She missed the way he'd say the same thing every single time she told him something was falling apart. "It'll work itself out, Ellie. It always does." Except it hadn't, and he wasn't here to say it anymore. "I don't know how to fix this, Dad," she whispered to the empty room, her voice cracking on the last word. And that's when her grip slipped. The Bible tumbled from her hands and hit the hardwood floor with a sharp resounding crack that echoed through the apartment. Elena gasped, dropped to her knees, reached for it. The fall had split the old binding straight down the spine. The leather had given way along a seam that was probably older than she was, and pages fanned out across the floor. She pressed them back together. Carefully, gently, the way you handle the last piece of someone you can't get back. But something was wrong. The spine. The thick leather spine of the book. It was hollow. Not damaged hollow. Deliberately hollow. Someone had carved out a channel inside the backing, and glued against the inner wall of that channel was an envelope. Heavy, yellowed, folded tight to fit the narrow space. Elena's hands stopped moving. A man who owned almost nothing in this world, who lived in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the south side of Chicago, who wore his shoes until the soles peeled off, that man had hidden something inside his most sacred possession, hidden it so carefully that no one would ever find it, unless the book itself broke apart. Her heart started pounding, not the grief kind, something else, something closer to fear. She peeled the envelope away from the dried glue. It resisted like it didn't want to be found, like Henry Carter had sealed it there with the full intention that it would stay sealed forever. She pried it open. Inside, a thick document, multiple pages, heavy stock paper stamped with the official seal of the state of Arkansas. Across the top, in bold typewriter font that had faded but was still perfectly legible, warranty deed. Elena blinked, read it again, rubbed her eyes, read it a third time. This warranty deed made this 14th day of October 1982, by and between the grantor Jacob Harris and the grantee Thomas Henry Carter. Thomas Henry Carter, her father's full legal name. She scanned down the page. Property description, her eyes moving faster than her brain could process. 45 acres, timber and pasture, Benton County, Arkansas. 1 residential farmhouse, 2 barns. And she read this part 3 times to make sure she wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. Full mineral rights. The property was recorded as Ridgewood Hollow. Elena sat completely still. 45 acres, a farmhouse, full mineral rights. Her father, the man who clipped coupons for dish soap, who took the bus to work because he said car insurance was a racket, who once told her he'd never left the state of Illinois in his entire adult life. That man owned a 45-acre farm in Arkansas. She turned to the last page. Attached by a rusted paperclip was a tax certificate property, taxes paid in full, every single year through something called an anonymous blind trust. The payments were consistent and unbroken, stretching all the way back to 1982, and the last payment, the very last one, was dated the same month he died. 40 years. He paid taxes on this land for 40 years while living like he didn't have a dollar to spare. The questions came fast. Too fast. Why did he own it? Why did he hide it? Why Arkansas? Why a blind trust? Why didn't he ever mention it, not once? Not to her, not to anyone. And the biggest one, the one that made her stomach clench, what was he hiding from? Because people don't fortify secrets inside Bibles unless they're afraid of something or someone. She didn't sleep. By 1 a.m., she was on her cracked smartphone typing the parcel number from the deed into the Benton County Assessor's website. The page loaded slow buffering on her dying Wi-Fi. Then it appeared. Ridgewood Hollow. Parcel confirmed. Owner of record Thomas Henry Carter. Estimated assessed value $485,000. Elena stared at the number until her vision blurred. Nearly $500,000. Just the land assessment. Not counting timber. Not counting mineral rights. Not counting whatever a farmhouse on 45 acres in the Ozarks might be worth to someone who needed a place to live. And she needed a place to live. By 3 a.m., she had made a decision. Not a careful one. Not a smart one. The kind of decision you make at 3 a.m. When you're sitting on the floor of an apartment, you're about to lose when your daughter is sleeping on a deflated air mattress 10 feet away, when the only thing standing between you and the street is a piece of yellowed paper hidden by a dead man who loved you more than he loved the truth. She was going to Arkansas. She packed the car before Sophie woke up, which wasn't hard because they didn't have much left to pack. 2 suitcases of clothes, a bag of toiletries. Sophie's stuffed rabbit named General Biscuit, who had been through 3 wash cycles and lost an ear somewhere around year 4, a box of granola bars, a gallon of water, and the deed folded carefully back into its envelope, tucked into the inside pocket of her purse close to her body. Sophie climbed into the car seat at 6 a.m., still half asleep, clutching General Biscuit by his remaining ear. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "On an adventure, baby." "Is it far?" "Pretty far." "Will there be pancakes?" "I'll find you some pancakes." Sophie nodded, satisfied, closed her eyes, and was asleep again before they hit the highway. Elena gripped the steering wheel and pulled onto I-57 South, driving toward a place she'd never been, toward a life her father had hidden from her for 34 years. She had no idea what she'd find. But she knew one thing: she wasn't going back to that apartment. She wasn't going back to counting days on an eviction notice. She wasn't going back to being the woman Marcus Webb had gutted and discarded. Whatever was waiting in Arkansas, it had to be better than what she was leaving behind. The drive was 8 hours of highway lines and truck stop coffee that tasted like hot disappointment. Sophie woke up around southern Illinois, sang songs to General Biscuit for 45 minutes, asked why the trees were getting bigger, asked why the road was getting bumpy, asked if Arkansas had dogs, asked if she could have more granola bars, fell back asleep somewhere around Memphis. Elena drove in silence after that, watching the landscape shift. Flat concrete and industrial sprawl slowly giving way to rolling green hills, dense forests of oak and pine that looked like they'd been standing since before anyone thought to name them, and winding 2-lane roads that cut through the Ozark Mountains like old scars. It was beautiful, in a way that made her chest ache, because beauty felt like something she hadn't earned, something that belonged to people whose lives weren't currently held together by duct tape and denial. By late afternoon, she crossed into Benton County. Her first stop wasn't the farm. It was the county clerk's office in Bentonville. She needed to verify the deed in person, needed to see someone official stamp something official and tell her this was real, that she wasn't chasing a hallucination, born from sleep deprivation and grief. The clerk's office was small. Fluorescent lights, industrial carpet. A woman sat behind the counter, heavy-set reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. Name tag, Betty. Betty looked up as Elena approached. "Help you, hun?" "Yes, I need to verify a property deed." Elena slid the yellow document across the counter, her fingers shaking slightly. "My father passed away recently. I found this in his things." Betty picked up the deed, adjusted her glasses, started reading. Elena watched her face and saw the exact moment everything changed. Betty's eyes hit the name Thomas Henry Carter, and her entire body went rigid. Not subtle, not the kind of thing you could miss. Her shoulders pulled back, her jaw tightened, and the professional boredom drained from her face. She looked up at Elena, eyes wide. "You're Henry's daughter, not Thomas, not Mr. Carter. Henry, first name, like she knew him." "Yes," Elena said. "Is there a problem with the deed?" Betty glanced towards the back of the office, quick, nervous checking if someone was listening. "The deed is valid," she said quietly, almost whispering. "It's yours, but hun—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "But what?" "Nothing." Betty slid the deed back across the counter with a trembling hand. "You should go see the property, and you should go today, before dark." She said it the way someone says lock your doors at night. Not casual, not friendly advice. A warning. Elena took the deed, stared at Betty for a long moment, then picked up Sophie's hand and walked out. She didn't make it to the car, because there was a man leaning against it. Tall, late 50s, silver hair slicked back with precision that cost money. Tailored suit that had absolutely no business being in a small-town government parking lot. His eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they locked onto Elena with the flat focus of a man who had already mapped out the next 10 minutes of her life. He smiled when he saw her, a smile that involved every muscle in his face, except the ones that matter. "You must be Elena." She stopped walking, tightened her grip on Sophie's hand. "Do I know you?" "Not yet." He extended a manicured hand. "Victor Ashford. I was your father's attorney down here for many years, handled his property matters. I was sorry to hear about his passing." Elena didn't take his hand. Something in her gut, something primal and wordless, told her not to touch this man. "How did you know I was here?" Ashford pulled his hand back smoothly. No offense taken, or at least none shown. "Small town, word travels. Betty mentioned someone came in asking about the Carter property. I put 2 and 2 together." Betty told him. Betty, who had just warned Elena to go see the property before dark. Betty, who had looked terrified. Betty was afraid of this man. "I was hoping I might buy you dinner." Ashford continued casual, as if he were asking about the weather. "There's a little place on the square. Best catfish in the county. We could talk about your father's estate. I imagine you have questions." "I have a lot of questions." "Then let me answer them. Over dinner. My treat." Elena looked at Sophie, who was staring up at Ashford with the unfiltered suspicion that only 6-year-olds possess. "Fine," Elena said. Not because she trusted him, because she needed information, and this man clearly had it. The diner was the kind of place that had laminated menus and coffee in ceramic mugs with chips on the rim. Ashford looked absurd sitting in the vinyl booth, but he acted like he owned the place. He probably did. Sophie sat next to Elena, coloring a kid's menu with a broken crayon. Ashford ordered sweet tea. Elena ordered coffee. Black. "So," Ashford said, folding his hands on the table, "you found the deed." "I did." "And you drove all the way from Chicago to see the property." "I did. With your daughter. In that car." He gestured vaguely toward the window, toward her rusted Civic in the parking lot. And there it was, just a flicker barely visible. But Elena caught it. He looked at her car the way you look at a stain on a restaurant tablecloth. "With my daughter. In that car. Elena." He leaned forward, voice dropping to something warm, sympathetic, thoroughly rehearsed. "I know you're going through a difficult time. The divorce, the financial strain. I know it's been hard." Elena's coffee cup stopped halfway to her mouth. "How do you know about my divorce?" "Your father mentioned it, before he passed. We corresponded regularly about the property." Lie. Her father never mentioned Arkansas, never mentioned Ashford, never mentioned corresponding with anyone about anything. Henry Carter was a man who paid his phone bill in cash at the gas station and thought email was a government surveillance tool. But Elena didn't say that. She put her coffee down and waited. "Here's the situation," Ashford said, leaning back, crossing one leg over the other. "That property, Ridgewood Hollow, your father bought it in 1982 with good intentions. Wanted to build a retirement home someday. But the land turned out to be sitting on an old chemical dumping site. Undocumented. The soil is contaminated. The water table is compromised. The county has been threatening to condemn it for years." He paused. Let the weight of the word condemn settle. "It's worthless, Elena. Worse than worthless. It's a liability. Environmental cleanup alone would cost more than the property is worth. Your father knew that. He kept paying the taxes out of stubbornness, sentiment, but he was pouring money into a hole in the ground." Elena listened, face neutral, hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "I'd like to help you," Ashford continued, reaching into his breast pocket, pulling out a leather-bound checkbook. "I'm prepared to take this burden off your hands. Right now. Today. I'll write you a cashier's check for $30,000. You sign the deed over to my development firm, and you walk away. Free and clear. Fresh start for you and your little girl." He clicked his pen, ready to write. $30,000. Elena stared at the checkbook, and for a moment, just a moment, the desperate broke, terrified mother inside her screamed, yes. $30,000 was an apartment, 3 months of breathing room, groceries, and gas, and maybe a chance to stop drowning. She almost said it. The word was right there on the tip of her tongue. But then she looked at Ashford's hands. Manicured, moisturized, hands that had never worked a night shift. And she thought about her father's hands. Rough, calloused, cracked at the knuckles from 35 years of sheet metal. Hands that gripped a Bible every night and paid property taxes every year, on a piece of land he never once mentioned to the daughter he called every Sunday. Henry Carter was not a fool. He was the smartest, quiet man Elena had ever known. He balanced his checkbook to the penny. He once returned a nickel to a gas station cashier who gave him too much change. He did not pour money into toxic swamps for 40 years out of sentiment. And Victor Ashford didn't write checks out of kindness. Men like Ashford wrote checks to make problems disappear. Elena was the problem. "No, thank you," she said. Quiet, steady. Ashford's pen stopped moving. "I'm sorry. I said no. I'm going to go see the property myself." The smile dissolved. "Elena." His voice hardened just slightly, just enough. "I strongly advise you to reconsider. The roads up there are dangerous. The property is in terrible condition. It's not safe for a woman alone with a child. It's my property, and I have a right to see it." She stood up, picked up Sophie's crayons, took her daughter's hand. "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Ashford." She walked out of the diner with her heart slamming against her ribs so hard she was sure the whole restaurant could hear it. She didn't look back. But if she had, she would have seen Ashford reach for his phone before the diner door even closed behind her. The GPS died 12 miles outside of town. The paved road turned to gravel. The gravel turned to dirt. The dirt turned to something barely wider than a hiking trail, winding up through dense forest, so thick the late afternoon sun disappeared behind a canopy of pine and red oak. Sophie pressed her face against the window. "Mommy, where are the houses?" "There aren't any houses out here, baby." "Why not?" "Because some places are just for trees." Elena drove slowly, following the hand-drawn map attached to the original deed. Her father's handwriting in the margins, small arrows, distance markers, notes in pencil that had faded to ghosts. He had drawn this map carefully, precisely like he expected someone to follow it someday, like he expected her. The road dead-ended at a gate. Massive, wrought iron, rusted to a deep orange brown. Ivy had swallowed most of the bars and the hinges were ancient, but the chain holding it shut was not. Brand new, shiny, heavy-gauge steel, and the lock a master lock fresh from the package. No rust, no weathering. Someone had been here recently. Elena sat in the car with the engine idling, staring at that lock. Who had put it there? Her father was dead. The property was in a blind trust. Who else had a reason to lock this gate? She popped the trunk, found the tire iron. Stay in the car, baby. Mommy has to open a gate. She swung the tire iron against the chain. Once. Twice. The impact rang up through her arms and into her shoulders. On the fourth swing, the chain snapped. She pushed the gates open. The hinges screamed a sound like something that hadn't been disturbed in years, suddenly being forced awake. The driveway was a quarter-mile long, lined with mature white oaks, whose branches formed a canopy overhead, creating a tunnel of green and gold as the last of the sunset filtered through. And then the trees broke, and Elena saw it. She slammed on the brakes. Oh my God! It wasn't a swamp. It wasn't a toxic dump. It wasn't a liability or a burden or any of the words Victor Ashford had used to describe it. Ridgewood Hollow was beautiful. A massive Victorian farmhouse sat on the crown of a gentle hill, 2 stories wraparound porch, white clapboard siding that had aged to a soft cream. Behind it, acres of emerald pasture rolling down toward a tree line of pine and hickory that seemed to stretch to the horizon. 2 barns flanked the east side of the property. Red, weathered, solid. But then she looked closer, and the beauty cracked. Every ground floor window, every single one, was covered from the inside with thick steel plates. Bolted, welded, not decorative, functional. The front door wasn't wood. It was heavy reinforced steel, like a bank vault, like something designed to keep people out or keep them in. And mounted under the eaves, spaced at precise intervals around the entire perimeter of the house security cameras. Modern, high definition, their small red indicator lights blinking steadily in the fading twilight. Active, recording, right now. Elena's excitement curdled into something darker, something that tasted like copper and adrenaline. Why would a factory worker from Chicago, a man who couldn't afford new shoes, own a fortified compound in the middle of the Ozarks? What was he protecting? What was he afraid of? She looked at Sophie in the rearview mirror. The little girl was staring at the house with her mouth open. Is that our house, Mommy? I think so, baby. Stay in the car for a minute. Okay? She locked Sophie inside, took the tire iron, and walked up the porch steps. The porch boards didn't creak. They were solid, maintained. Someone had been taking care of this house. The steel front door had a keypad lock, digital, modern, completely incongruent with the Victorian architecture. A 4-digit code. Could be anything. She typed her birthday, 0824. The keypad flashed green. A heavy bolt slid back with a deep metallic clunk that she felt in her chest. Her birthday. Her father had secured his secret fortress with her birthday, and something about the simplicity and the tenderness of that choice made her eyes burn in a way grief alone never had. She pushed the door open. The house exhaled cool, stale, but clean. Not the musty smell of an abandoned building, the preserved smell of a space that had been sealed and maintained. She found a light switch, flipped it. The lights worked, fully furnished. Leather couches arranged around a massive stone fireplace. A kitchen with modern appliances, granite countertops, a dining table set for 4, bookshelves filled with paperbacks and encyclopedias, a record player in the corner with a stack of vinyl Johnny Cash, Patsy Cline, Sam Cooke. It looked like someone lived here, like someone had just stepped out to get the mail and would be back any minute. Her father had built a home, a real home, not the cramped apartment in Chicago where he slept on a pull-out couch and ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter. This was the home he actually wanted, the life he actually dreamed about, and he never lived in it, never brought her here, never sat in that leather chair or played those records or lit that fireplace. Why? She walked down the hallway and stopped. The walls were covered in photographs, framed, arranged in neat rows, hundreds of them. Elena moved closer and felt every drop of blood leave her face. They were pictures of her. Elena at the grocery store. Elena walking Sophie to school. Elena sitting on a park bench in Lincoln Park, reading a book she'd forgotten the title of. Sophie on the swings. Sophie in her Halloween costume, the bumblebee, last year. Sophie blowing out candles on her 5th birthday cake. Marcus getting into his car outside their old house. Marcus at a restaurant with a young blonde woman Elena had never seen. Marcus walking into a building downtown that she didn't recognize. The photos were taken from a distance long-range telephoto lens, professional quality, date stamped in the bottom right corner. Going back years. The most recent ones dated the week her father died. Elena grabbed the wall. Her knees buckled, but she locked them, forced herself to stay standing because if she went down now, she wasn't sure she'd get back up. Her father hadn't just owned a secret farm. He hadn't just lived a double life. He had been watching them, all of them, for years. Every school drop-off, every grocery run, every walk in the park. Henry Carter had been surveilling his own daughter's life from 600 miles away, not because he was paranoid, not because he was controlling, because he was protecting her from something so dangerous that he couldn't even tell her about it. Something so threatening that the only way to keep her safe was to watch from the shadows and pray she never found out. The photographs on the wall weren't evidence of obsession. They were evidence of love, the most desperate, exhausting, heartbreaking kind of love a parent can have, where you sacrifice your own life to shield someone who doesn't even know they're in danger. Elena pressed her forehead against the wall and wept. Not for herself, for him, for the lonely old man in the flannel shirts who spent his nights in a factory and his savings on cameras and plane tickets to a state his daughter didn't know existed, who lived in poverty so she could live in ignorance, who died alone with a secret stitched into his Bible because the truth was too dangerous to speak out loud. "Dad," she whispered, "what were you so afraid of?" That. The knock came from behind her. Elena spun around, heart in her throat, tire iron raised, but the figure standing on the porch wasn't Victor Ashford. It was an old woman, 72, maybe 73, short, thin, weather-beaten face creased with decades of sun and hard living, white hair pulled back in a practical bun, flannel shirt tucked into jeans, work boots. She looked like she'd walked out of the woods themselves. She was looking at Elena with an expression that was hard to read. Not surprise, not suspicion, something closer to relief. "You look just like him," the old woman said, her voice rough and gravelly, the voice of someone who'd spent a lifetime talking to open sky and not enough people. "Who are you?" "Ruth Holloway. I live about a mile down the ridge. Your daddy was my neighbor." She paused, looked past Elena into the lit-up house. "I've been waiting for you, girl. Long time now, waiting for me." Ruth stepped closer. Her eyes were red-rimmed, wet. "Henry asked me to, before he died. He called me in the middle of the night. He said, 'Ruth, if my girl ever comes to the property, you help her. But don't tell her everything at once. Wait until she's ready.'" Elena stared at her. "Ready for what?" Ruth looked at the photographs on the hallway wall visible through the open front door. Her jaw tightened. "For the truth about why your daddy lived the way he did, and died the way he died." She turned back to Elena, something fierce in her expression, something protective. "But not tonight. Tonight you bring that baby inside. You lock those doors, and you don't open them for anyone, especially not Victor Ashford." "You know Ashford." Ruth's face hardened, the lines deepening into something that had been composting for years. "Everybody in this county knows Ashford, and everybody in this county is afraid of him, except your daddy. Your daddy was the only man who ever stood up to that rattlesnake, and it cost him everything." She reached out and squeezed Elena's arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You're not alone, Elena. I know it feels that way right now, but you're not. Your daddy made sure of that." Then she turned, walked off the porch, and disappeared down the dark tree line. Elena brought Sophie inside, fed her peanut butter crackers from the kitchen pantry, which was stocked canned goods. Dry pasta, rice, coffee, all unexpired. Her father had kept this house ready, provisioned, and waiting for a storm he knew was coming. Sophie fell asleep on the leather couch with General Biscuit tucked under her chin. Elena sat in the hallway surrounded by photographs of a life she'd lived without knowing she was being watched. Protected, she should have felt violated. Angry. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in months, maybe years. Safe. Her father was gone, but the walls he'd built were still standing. The cameras were still recording. The locks were still holding. And somewhere down the ridge, an old woman named Ruth was keeping a promise to a dead man. Elena pulled out her cracked phone. Signal was weak but present. She typed Victor Ashford, Benton County, Arkansas. The results loaded slowly, and what she found made her sit up straight. Victor Ashford wasn't just a small-town attorney. He was the founder and CEO of Ashford Resource Group, a mining and land development conglomerate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. A billionaire, offering her $30,000 for a 45-acre farm. That wasn't a generous offer. That was an insult. The kind of offer you make when you think someone is too desperate and too stupid to know what they're sitting on. Elena kept scrolling. News articles, business profiles, charity galas, photos of Ashford shaking hands with politicians. Then she found something else. In a cached webpage from a now-defunct local newspaper, a small article from 3 years ago about a reporter named Jenna Cole who had been sued for defamation by Ashford Resource Group. The article said Ms. Cole had published allegations about environmental contamination linked to Ashford's mining operations. The lawsuit bankrupted her. She lost her job. The article was pulled. Environmental contamination, the same thing Ashford had told Elena about her property. He'd accused her land of being contaminated, and he'd destroyed a reporter who accused his company of the same thing. Elena put the phone down and stared at the ceiling, and then she remembered a detail she'd skimmed past earlier, a small thing that now felt enormous. The deed included full mineral rights. Mineral rights, whatever was underneath that land. Oil, gas, lithium, gold, whatever it belonged to the owner of the surface. It belonged to Henry Carter. It belonged to her. Victor Ashford wasn't trying to buy a contaminated swamp for $30,000. He was trying to steal whatever was under it, and her father had spent 40 years making sure he couldn't. Elena stood up, walked back to the photographs on the wall, found the picture of Marcus getting into his car, dated 2 years before the divorce. She pulled it off the wall. On the back, in her father's handwriting, a single line, meeting with V.A. confirmed. November 14th, downtown office, VA, Victor Ashford. Marcus had met with Victor Ashford 2 years before the divorce. The room tilted. Elena pressed her palm flat against the wall and breathed through it. The divorce, the drained savings, the aggressive push to take the house, the new girlfriend, the sudden financial ruin. It wasn't a midlife crisis. It wasn't Marcus being selfish. It was a plan, a calculated, coordinated surgical plan to break her financially, so that when she inherited a worthless piece of land from her dead father, she would sell it for pennies without asking questions. Marcus didn't just betray her in a marriage. He was placed in her life by Ashford to get close to Henry's daughter, to wait for the old man to die, and to make sure the land ended up in the right hands. 10 years. 10 years she had loved a man who was being paid to destroy her. Sophie's birthday parties, Christmas mornings, the night Sophie was born, and Marcus held her and cried and said she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. All of it. Choreographed. Something shifted inside Elena then. Not grief. Not shock. Something hot and quiet with teeth. Something that didn't flinch. She looked at the photo of Marcus, his handsome face, his easy smile, the face she had trusted with everything she had. Then she looked at the photographs of Sophie, her daughter, running, laughing, living, unaware. She was not going to sell this land. She was not going to run. She was going to find out exactly what her father died protecting, and she was going to finish whatever he started. Elena checked every lock in the house, studied the camera feeds one more time, and for the first time since her father died, she felt his steady presence, somewhere just behind her shoulder, his quiet voice in her ear. "It'll work itself out, Ellie. It always does." Elena didn't leave. She should have. Any reasonable person would have packed up the kid, get back on I-57 Drive North until Arkansas was nothing but a bad memory and a story she'd tell someday over wine. But Elena Carter wasn't feeling particularly reasonable anymore. She enrolled Sophie at Ridgewood Elementary on Monday morning. Small school, brick building, the kind of place where the principal knows every kid's name and the cafeteria smells like tater tots and floor wax. Sophie walked in clutching General Biscuit and walked out 3 hours later with a best friend named Daisy and a finger painting of a horse. Kids adjust faster than adults. Elena envied that. She spent the first week trying to make the farmhouse feel like a home instead of a crime scene. Took down some of the surveillance photos. Not all of them. She couldn't bring herself to remove the ones of Sophie. There was something about seeing her daughter through her father's eyes, the careful framing, the way he always captured Sophie mid-laugh, as though he was trying to hold on to a moment he was never allowed to be part of. She left those up, told herself she'd deal with them later. But really, she just wasn't ready to erase the last evidence that Henry Carter had loved them from a distance he never chose. The farmhouse was solid. The plumbing worked. The well water ran clear and cold. The generator kicked on without complaint. Whoever had been maintaining this place, and someone clearly had, they'd done it with care. Elena started breathing again. Just a little. Just enough to think maybe this could work. That lasted exactly 9 days. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not in the mailbox. There was no mailbox. Deputy Sam Briggs delivered it himself, drove his county cruiser right up the driveway, and parked it at an angle so she could see the badge on the door from the kitchen window. Briggs was mid-40s with a thick neck and mirrored sunglasses even on cloudy days. He wore his authority the way some men wear cologne too much everywhere, impossible to ignore. He knocked on the steel door. 3 times. Hard. Elena opened it. Sophie was at school. She was alone. "Ms. Carter." "Yes." "Got some papers for you." He held out a manila envelope. Didn't smile. Didn't frown. Just held it out the way a man holds out something he knows is going to ruin your day. Elena took it. Opened it standing right there in the doorway. A civil complaint. Filed in Benton County Circuit Court. Ashford Resource Group, LLC, versus estate of Thomas Henry Carter, claiming the 1982 land purchase was conducted through fraudulent means, demanding the deed be voided and the property returned to its rightful owner. Elena read it twice. The legal language was dense, deliberately confusing, but the message was clear. Ashford wasn't offering $30,000 anymore. He was taking the land by force. "You've been served," Briggs said. "I can see that. You know." He shifted his weight, leaned against the doorframe. "This is a quiet town, Ms. Carter. People here like things the way they are. Outsiders coming in, stirring things up, making claims on property. It makes folks nervous." Elena stared at him. "Is that a warning?" "That's friendly advice." "Funny. That's the second time someone in this town has given me friendly advice about my own property." Briggs pushed his sunglasses up on his head. His eyes were small and pale, the eyes of a man who had practiced looking hard until it became habit. "You've got a little girl, Ms. Carter. Sweet kid. I see her walking to school every morning. Cute backpack. Purple. With the little stars on it." Elena's blood went cold. He wasn't just describing Sophie's backpack. He was telling Elena that he knew where her daughter walked, what time, what route, what she was wearing. "Get off my porch," Elena said. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that because everything else was shaking. Briggs smiled slow, put his sunglasses back down, tapped the manila envelope. "Have a nice day, Ms. Carter." He drove away, gravel crunching under his tires. Elena locked the door, sat down at the kitchen table, pressed her fists against her eyes until she saw stars. She was in real trouble, not the Chicago kind, not the missed rent and maxed credit card kind. The kind where a man with a badge tells you he knows what your daughter's backpack looks like and means something by it. The isolation started the next day. Elena drove into town to open a bank account. She needed somewhere to deposit what little cash she had left, somewhere to start building a financial footprint so she could fight the lawsuit. The First National Bank of Bentonville had one branch, one manager, a man named Patterson, who wore a clip-on tie and sweated when he talked. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter. We're unable to process your application at this time." "Why not?" "There are irregularities with your identification documents." "I have a valid Illinois driver's license, a social security card, and the deed to a property in this county." Patterson dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. "I understand, but we've received a flag on the property in question. Until the legal status is resolved, we can't A flag from who?" Patterson looked at his desk, his handkerchief, the wall, anywhere but Elena's eyes. She didn't need him to answer. The grocery store was next. She picked up bread, milk, peanut butter, Sophie's favorite cereal. The cashier, a teenage girl with braces, rang everything up, then paused. Ma'am, my manager says we can't process this transaction." "What?" "I'm sorry, I don't know why. He just said—" Elena looked past the cashier through the window into the back office where the store manager was standing with a phone pressed to his ear, not looking at her. She left the groceries on the counter and walked out. The hardware store wouldn't sell her a replacement lock. The gas station attendant said the pump was broken. The pharmacy said her insurance couldn't be verified. Every single door in Bentonville closed in her face within 48 hours. Victor Ashford didn't need thugs or lawsuits or anything as crude as violence. He just needed to make one phone call, and the entire town obeyed. Because he owned this town not metaphorically, but literally. The bank, the businesses, the county contracts, the deputy. All of it ran through Ashford Resource Group, and Elena was a foreign organism being rejected by every cell. She drove back to the farmhouse that evening with an empty trunk and a full understanding of exactly how alone she was. Except she wasn't quite alone, because when she pulled up the driveway, there was a paper bag sitting on her front porch. Inside, bread, milk, eggs, canned soup, a jar of strawberry preserves, and a note in shaky handwriting. Henry would have done the same for me. Ruth. Elena sat on the porch steps holding the jar of preserves, and for the second time since arriving in Arkansas, she let the tears come. But these were different from the tears in the hallway. Warmer. Because in a town that had been ordered to shut her out, an old woman with a bad hip and a pickup truck had driven to the next county to buy groceries for a stranger's daughter. Because a dead man had once been kind to her. That was enough. Not to win, not yet, but enough to stay standing. The basement called to her on a Thursday night. She'd been avoiding it ever since the first evening when she'd seen the blue glow spilling from underneath the heavy oak door at the end of the hallway. She'd peeked down the stairs, seen the monitors, felt the cold concrete air rise up, and walked away. Because she wasn't ready. Now she was, or at least she couldn't afford not to be. Sophie was asleep upstairs. The house was locked. All 7 camera feeds on the hallway monitor showed nothing but moonlit pasture and empty driveway. Elena opened the oak door, took the first step down. The stairs were wooden sturdy, and they didn't creak. Which somehow made it worse. The house had been designed to let you descend in silence, to keep whatever was down here a secret even from itself. The basement was larger than she expected. Concrete floor, concrete walls, low ceiling. Cool and dry. Against the far wall, a bank of monitors, 8 screens each displaying a different live camera feed from around the property. The front gate, the driveway, the east barn, the west pasture, the tree line, the back of the house, 2 interior angles. she hadn't noticed cameras for. Her father hadn't just installed a security system. He'd built a surveillance command center. In the center of the room sat a metal desk, heavy industrial, the kind you'd find in a government building. And on top of it, an open briefcase. Elena walked over slowly. It was packed with money, neatly banded stacks of $100 bills. She didn't count them, didn't need to. There were hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting on a desk in a basement in Arkansas. Cash, untraceable, ready. Her father, the man who returned nickels, who clipped coupons for dish soap, who told her he couldn't afford to fly down for Sophie's 5th birthday because the plane ticket was too expensive. That man had a briefcase full of cash in his basement. Elena felt sick. Not because of the money, because of the lie. Because every phone call where he said, "I'm sorry," Ellie money's tight every Christmas, where he mailed Sophie a $20 bill in a card, because that's all I can manage. Every time he deflected her questions about retirement, with a tired, "I'll figure it out." All of it was a meticulously maintained illusion of poverty designed to keep her from asking questions that would lead her here, to this house, to this room, to whatever truth was worth more than his relationship with his only daughter. And resting on top of the money, a handwritten letter in her father's angular cursive, addressed to her, Elena. She picked it up. Her hands were steady, which surprised her because her heart was hammering so hard the sound of it filled the entire room. She carried the letter to the blue light of the monitors and read, "Elena, if you are reading this, I am already gone, and they have not found this room, which means you found the Bible first, which means I raised you right. For 30 years, I was not just a sheet metal worker. That was real. I did work those shifts. I did earn that paycheck, but I also did something else. In 1985, 3 years after I bought this land, a man named Victor Ashford hired me through a shell company called Ridgeline Consulting. My job was forensic accounting, auditing financial records for his network of mining and land development operations across Benton County. I was good at it, Elena. Numbers always made sense to me the way words never did. Ashford paid well, and I needed the money. You were a baby. Your mother was struggling. I didn't ask questions. I should have asked questions. Within 2 years, I discovered 3 things that changed everything. First, Ashford's mining operations were dumping chemical waste into the local groundwater, deliberately, systematically, poisoning the wells and aquifers that supplied drinking water to every working family in the county. Second, he was financing these operations by embezzling from union pension funds. 43 families, blue-collar workers, miners, factory men, people who spent their whole lives paying into retirement accounts that Ashford was quietly draining to fund illegal lithium extraction. Third, this land, Ridgewood Hollow, sits directly on top of the largest clean aquifer left in the county, and underneath it, a lithium vein worth more money than either of us can imagine. Ashford needs this land. He has always needed this land. Without it, he cannot access the lithium legally. He cannot legitimize his empire. Everything he has built depends on owning what I own. I bought this land through a blind trust to stop him. I have spent 40 years making sure he cannot take it. Below this letter you will find a USB drive. On it is every financial record, every transaction, every name, every date, every dollar he stole. It is enough to put him in prison for the rest of his life. I was going to bring it to the federal investigators myself. I had been working with them, quietly, for years. They assigned me a contact, a special agent named Dawson. I was supposed to deliver the final evidence package last month, but I didn't make it. Elena, do not trust the local police. Do not trust Marcus. Lock the doors. I love you. I have always loved you. Everything I did. Everything I hid. Every lie I told. It was all for you, Dad. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it, pressed it against her chest, and stood completely still in the blue light of the monitors. Her father was a whistleblower, not a criminal, not a con man, not a man living some dark double life of greed and secrecy. A whistleblower, a forensic accountant who stumbled onto corruption so massive and so dangerous that it consumed his entire existence, who spent 40 years gathering evidence, paying taxes, maintaining a fortress, and pretending to be a poor factory worker so that the most powerful man in the county would never think to look twice at him. And it killed him. She picked up the USB drive. Small, silver, unremarkable. But inside it was 40 years of meticulous documentation, the life's work of a man who wore flannel shirts and clipped coupons, and never told his daughter he loved her enough because he was too busy trying to save her. Elena plugged the USB into the desktop computer on the surveillance desk. The files were organized with the same obsessive precision her father applied to everything: folders by year, subfolders by category. Financial records, transaction logs, correspondence, photographs of documents, scanned receipts, and one folder she almost missed, labeled simply, Medical. She opened it. Inside, a single PDF, a blood panel dated 4 months before her father died. Not from a hospital, from a private lab out of state, the kind of test you order when you don't trust your local doctor to keep it confidential. Elena scanned the results. Most of it was medical jargon she didn't understand, but one line was highlighted. Her father had drawn a thick red circle around it. Arsenic level 487 micrograms per liter. She didn't know what the number meant, so she searched it on the desktop computer, which had a satellite internet connection she hadn't known existed. Normal arsenic levels in blood less than 12 micrograms per liter. 487, more than 40 times the safe limit. She searched again. Arsenic poisoning. Symptoms: chronic exposure, fatigue, numbness in extremities, heart palpitations, organ failure, cardiac arrest. Her father didn't die of a heart attack. He was murdered. Slow, methodical, undetectable to anyone who wasn't looking. Arsenic introduced into his system over months, maybe years, building up, gradually damaging his organs, weakening his heart, until one Tuesday night at the factory, it finally gave out. And no one ordered an autopsy because who? Autopsy's a 67-year-old factory worker who dies of a heart attack, Victor Ashford. That's who made it look that way. Elena closed the laptop, walked upstairs, checked on Sophie sleeping peaceful General Biscuit, wedged under her arm. Then she went to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the faucet so Sophie wouldn't hear, and threw up. She spent 2 days not functioning, not collapsed, not catatonic, just empty. She fed Sophie, drove her to school, made peanut butter sandwiches, read bedtime stories, did all the mechanical things a mother does. But behind her eyes there was nothing. A flat gray screen where her thoughts used to be. Her father was murdered. Her husband was a plant. Her town was a trap. She could sell the land, take the money, drive to Oregon or Maine or anywhere that wasn't here, start over, change their names, disappear the way people disappear when the fight is too big and the cost is too high. Sophie would never know. She'd grow up thinking her grandfather was a nice old man who died too soon. She'd forget Arkansas. She'd forget the farmhouse. She'd forget all of it. And Victor Ashford would get his land, mine his lithium, keep his empire, and 43 families would never see their pensions, and Henry Carter's death would mean nothing. Elena sat on the back porch. Late afternoon. Sophie was inside watching an animated movie about a dog. The sound of cartoon laughter drifting through the screen door felt like it belonged to a different universe. Ruth's old blue pickup appeared at the bottom of the hill, engine rattling, and climbed the driveway slowly. She parked near the barn and got out, carrying a casserole dish covered in tinfoil. She didn't say hello, didn't ask permission, just walked up the porch steps, set the casserole on the railing, and sat down in the chair next to Elena. They sat in silence for a long time. 5 minutes, maybe 10, watching the tree line shift in the late afternoon light. "You're thinking about leaving," Ruth said. Not a question. I'm thinking about a lot of things. Let me tell you about Earl. Elena looked at her. Ruth's face was turned toward the pasture, her eyes focused on something that wasn't there anymore. Earl Holloway, my husband. 38 years we were married. He worked the phosphate mine outside of Decatur, 28 years underground. Came home every night with dust in his lungs and a paycheck in his pocket. And every paycheck, a piece of it went into his pension fund. Company matched union guaranteed. We were going to buy a little house in Florida. He was going to fish. I was going to sit on a porch that didn't face a mountain and read romance novels until my eyes gave out. She paused. Her hands were folded in her lap, and the knuckles had gone white. When Earl retired in 2014, we went to collect, and the fund was empty. Not low, empty. Every dollar he'd put in for 28 years gone. The company said it was a market downturn, bad investments, nothing they could do. Earl filed complaints, called lawyers. Nobody would take the case. Ashford owned the mining company. Ashford managed the pension fund through a subsidiary nobody could trace, and Ashford owned every lawyer in the county. Ruth's jaw tightened. Earl died 2 years later. His heart gave out, that's what the doctor said. But I know what killed him. Shame. He believed he failed me, believed he'd worked 28 years and had nothing to show for it. He couldn't live with that. Not because he was weak, because he was proud, and pride is a heavy thing to carry when someone steals the ground out from under it. She turned to look at Elena, and her eyes were fierce, not sad, fierce with the fierceness of a woman who had buried her husband and spent every year since remembering exactly why. Your daddy knew about Earl. He knew about all 43 families. That's why he bought this land. That's why he kept it. Not for the money, not for the lithium. To stop the man who stole from people like Earl. People who worked their whole lives and deserved better. Elena stared at the pasture, the grass rippling in the breeze. If I fight this, I could lose Sophie. Ashford has lawyers. He has the deputy. He could take her from me. Maybe. He could destroy me. Maybe. So why should I stay? Ruth reached over and took Elena's hand. Her grip was rough, calloused. The hands of a woman who had chopped her own firewood for 8 years because there was no one left to do it for her. Because if you don't, then Earl died for nothing. And your daddy died for nothing. And Ashford wins again. And the next girl who finds a deed in a Bible won't have a Ruth sitting on her porch telling her she's not alone. Elena didn't answer. Not right away. But she didn't pack the car that night. And that was answer enough. She found Jenna Cole 3 days later. Not easily. Jenna wasn't listed in any directory, didn't have a published address, didn't appear on social media. The defamation lawsuit from Ashford had wiped her from public life as effectively as if she'd been erased with a pencil. But Ruth knew where she was, because in a small town, the people who've been crushed by the same boot tend to find each other eventually. Jenna lived in a rented trailer 14 miles outside of Bentonville on a gravel lot behind a shuttered feed store. The trailer was small, clean, and organized with the precision of someone who had learned to live with very little and make it count. She answered the door on the second knock. Late 30s. Dark hair pulled back. Glasses. She looked exhausted in a way that wasn't about sleep. The bone-deep exhaustion of someone fighting a war nobody else can see. Whatever you're selling. No. I'm not selling anything. I'm Elena Carter. Henry Carter's daughter. Jenna's hand froze on the door handle. She stared at Elena for a long time, and something moved across her face that she tried to hide surprise, and underneath it, the faintest flicker of hunger. Then she stepped aside. Not an invitation exactly, more like a surrender to something she'd been waiting for without knowing it. The trailer's kitchen table was covered in papers, printouts, court filings, old newspaper clippings, a laptop with a cracked screen held together by electrical tape. Jenna had never stopped investigating. She'd lost her job, her savings, her reputation. But she hadn't stopped. Elena pulled the USB drive from her jacket, set it on the table. My father left this in his house. It's 40 years of financial records, every transaction, every stolen dollar, every name connected to Ashford Resource Group. Jenna looked at the USB drive. Then she looked at Elena. How do I know this is real? You don't. Plug it in and find out. And if Ashford finds out I'm involved? He already bankrupted me once. I barely survived it. I'm not sure I survive it again. Then don't help me. I'll find another way. They stared at each other across the cluttered table. Two women who didn't know each other, who had no reason to trust each other, who were both terrified of the same man. Jenna picked up the USB drive, turned it over in her fingers. Then she plugged it into her cracked laptop. She didn't look up for 3 hours. When she finally did, the exhaustion was still there, but something else had joined it. The look of a woman who had just been handed the weapon she'd been searching for since the day they took everything from her. This is everything, Jenna said quietly, almost reverently. Elena, this is everything. Forensic accounting records going back decades. Transaction chains, shell company structures, pension fund diversions, mining permits filed under false pretenses, environmental test results that were falsified. She scrolled through more files, her eyes widening. Your father wasn't just keeping records. He was building a federal case. This is prosecutor-ready, organized, annotated, cross-referenced. He spent decades on this. Can it take Ashford down? This can put him away for the rest of his life, if it gets to the right people. My father mentioned an FBI agent, someone named Dawson. Jenna nodded slowly. I've heard the name. Never been able to reach him. But if your father was working with a federal contact, that means there's already an open investigation. They're waiting for the evidence. She looked at Elena, serious, steady. But Elena, none of this matters if we can't get it out of this county. Ashford controls the local mail system. Briggs monitors package shipments. The moment anything leaves this town addressed to a federal office, it'll disappear. So we deliver it ourselves. That's the only way. They sat in the quiet trailer, two women, one who had been silenced and one who had been kept in the dark, both holding the same USB drive, both understanding for the first time that the fight ahead of them was bigger than either of them alone, but also understanding for the first time that alone wasn't the only option anymore. Son, it was the journal that broke her open. Not the letter, not the money, not the arsenic, the journal. Elena found it on her second sweep of the basement, tucked behind the server rack in a fireproof lockbox bolted to the wall. A composition notebook, the cheap black and white kind you buy at a drugstore for $2, filled cover to cover with her father's handwriting. She carried it upstairs, made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and read it from the first page to the last. It took her all night. The journal wasn't organized like the USB files. It wasn't a forensic document. It was a diary, raw, unedited, the private thoughts of a man who had no one to talk to and desperately needed to talk to someone. The early entries were practical. Notes about the property, maintenance schedules, camera installation records, tax payment confirmations. But as the years progressed, the entries became something else entirely. Confessional. Anguish, the writing of a man slowly being crushed by the weight of what he knew and what he'd lost. The entry dated March 15, 1997, stopped Elena's breath. Margaret knows. She found the files I brought home from Ridgeline, the financial records from the pension diversions. I told her not to look. I told her it was better if she didn't know. But she's Margaret. She doesn't let things go. She wants to go public. She wants to call the county newspaper. She wants to go to the sheriff. She doesn't understand. The sheriff works for Ashford. The newspaper works for Ashford. There is no one to tell. I told her. Margaret, please, if you do this, he will come for us, for Elena, for all of us. She said she didn't care. She said living with a lie was worse than dying for the truth. I loved her for that, and I hated her for that. The next entry was dated April 2nd, 1997, 2 weeks later. Margaret is gone. She went to the county office on Tuesday. She had copies of the financial records. She was going to file a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office. She never came home. The police say she left voluntarily, packed a bag, took her car, filed a missing person report. Detectives said it happens. Women leave, especially women in difficult marriages. I am not in a difficult marriage. I love my wife. My wife loves me. My wife did not leave. But I cannot prove it, and the detective works for the same county that works for Ashford, and Margaret's car was found at a bus station 2 states away, wiped clean, parked neatly, like someone wanted it to look like a woman who chose to disappear. I know what happened. I can't prove it. But I know Elena, her mother, Margaret Ann Carter, née Sullivan, born 1963 in Rockford, Illinois. Brown hair, brown eyes, smelled like lemon soap and lavender, sang off-key in the car, made pancakes in the shape of animals on Saturday mornings. Elena was 5 years old when her mother disappeared. Her father told her, "Mommy had to go away. Mommy loves you very much. Mommy will come back someday." She waited. Years. At the window at the mailbox at school pickup, looking for a brown-haired woman in a blue coat who smelled like lemons. She never came. And eventually Elena stopped waiting, stopped asking, built a wall around the empty space where her mother used to be, and decided it was easier to believe she'd been abandoned than to keep hoping for someone who was never going to walk through the door. Her father let her believe that. He let his daughter believe her mother chose to leave, because the alternative, telling a 5-year-old that her mother was taken by a man powerful enough to make a woman vanish without a trace, was a cruelty he would not inflict on his child, so he carried it alone. For 29 years. Elena read the rest of the journal through tears so thick she could barely see the pages. Entries about packing up their life and moving to Chicago, about telling Elena that Mommy went away, about watching his daughter's face close, and the guilt page after page of it, a man drowning in the knowledge that his child believed she was unloved by her mother, and he couldn't correct it without putting her in danger. The last entry was dated 1 week before he died. I know I'm running out of time. The symptoms are getting worse. I can feel it in my hands. My heartbeat is wrong, irregular. I had the blood tested privately. I know what they're doing to me. I won't make it to Dawson. I know that now. But Elena will find the Bible. She will come to Arkansas, because she is her mother's daughter. She doesn't let things go. I'm sorry, Ellie, for all of it. For the silence. For the lies. For every birthday I missed because I was down here installing cameras instead of sitting at your table watching you blow out candles. Everything I hid. Everything I sacrificed. It was never because I didn't love you enough. It was because I loved you too much to let you anywhere near this. Finish what I started, please. Elena closed the journal, set it on the table, put her head down on her arms, and grieved. Not for the father she lost, but for the father she never knew she had. The one who built a fortress and filed away 40 years of evidence, and paid for cameras to watch his granddaughter play, and died alone in a factory with poison in his blood, and a secret sewn into his Bible. And for her mother, Margaret, who didn't leave, who never chose to leave, who walked into a county office with a stack of papers and the courage to say this is wrong, and was erased for it. She grieved for all of it, the lost years, the misunderstandings, the silence that she had mistaken for distance, and now understood was the most desperate act of love her father was capable of. Then she washed her face, made more coffee, and texted Jenna, "Come to the farmhouse tomorrow. We need to talk about getting the USB to Agent Dawson. I'm not leaving. I'm not selling. We're finishing this." Marcus came on a Sunday. No warning, no phone call, just his rented silver sedan pulling up the driveway at 10 a.m. Elena watched him on the security monitors, saw him park, saw him check his hair in the rearview mirror, saw him adjust his jacket collar, practicing, getting into character. She met him on the porch, arms crossed, door locked behind her. "Elena," he smiled, soft, careful, the smile he used to give her when he came home late and needed her not to ask questions. "Can we talk?" "About what?" "About us. About Sophie. About everything." He took a step forward, hands open, palms up. "I know I messed up. I know the divorce was ugly. But I've been doing a lot of thinking and I miss my family." Elena said nothing, watched him. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because Sophie is my daughter too, and I want to be in her life. I want to be a good father. I know I haven't been, but I'm trying." His voice cracked on the word trying, perfectly timed, a hairline fracture in his composure designed to let sincerity leak through. Elena knew this man. She had slept next to him for 10 years. She knew the way his voice cracked when he was actually upset. And this wasn't it. This was performance polished, rehearsed the same way he'd rehearsed their wedding vows. But she didn't say that, because she needed to know why he was really here, what Ashford had sent him to do. "Come in," she said. She made coffee, set out mugs, let him sit at the kitchen table in the house her father had built. Let him look around with those eyes that cataloged every detail, where the hallway led, whether the basement door was visible, how many exits the room had. Sophie came downstairs, saw Marcus, froze. "Hey, pumpkin." Marcus knelt down, arms open. Sophie looked at Elena. Elena nodded. Sophie walked over slowly. Let Marcus hug her. Didn't hug back. Stood stiff in his arms with her elbows pressed against her sides, the way children do when something feels wrong, but they don't have the words for it yet. Marcus talked for an hour, about Chicago, about his mistakes, about how the apartment felt empty without them. He even cried one tear left eye rolling down his cheek at a photogenic angle. Then he asked to use the bathroom. Elena watched him walk down the hallway, heard the bathroom door close. She had 45 seconds, maybe 60. She stood up, walked to the kitchen chair where Marcus had draped his jacket. She already knew what she was looking for. She'd known since the moment he walked in, smelling like preparation and false remorse. She reached into the inside pocket. His phone. Screen locked. But the voice memo app was active. Recording. Had been recording since he walked in the door. The timestamp showed 47 minutes. And in the recent calls list, one number called 3 times in the last 24 hours. The contact name, VA, Victor Ashford. Elena put the phone back, sat down, picked up her coffee mug. The toilet flushed. Water ran. Marcus came back, smiling. "This is a nice place, Elena. Really, your dad had good taste." He did. "Listen, I was thinking maybe I could take Sophie into town for ice cream. Just the two of us. Give you a little break. Take Sophie, out of the house, out of Elena's sight, into a town controlled by Ashford. I think Sophie has homework. On a Sunday. She's behind from the transfer. Her teacher sent extra worksheets." Marcus's smile flickered, a millisecond glitch in the broadcast. "Right. Well, maybe next time." He stood up, put his jacket back on, buttoning it carefully over the phone in the inside pocket. "I should go. But Elena..." He stopped at the front door, turned back. And there it was, the performance of a lifetime, eyes wet, jaw trembling. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know whatever happened between us, I never faked loving Sophie." Elena looked at him, at the man she had married, the man she had trusted with her body and her daughter and her future. "Goodbye, Marcus." "Not goodbye for now. Not goodbye until next time. Goodbye." He heard it. She saw him hear it. Something shifted behind his eyes, the mask slipping just a centimeter, just enough for the real Marcus to peek through. Cold, calculating, annoyed. Then the mask slid back. He nodded, walked to his car, drove away. Elena locked the door, checked the monitors until his silver sedan wound down the mountain road and disappeared behind the tree line. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and called Jenna. "It's Elena. Marcus was here. What did he want?" "He was recording, voice memo, the whole conversation, phone in his jacket pocket." Silence on the line. "He's building a case for Ashford, trying to get me on tape saying something they can use in the custody hearing, or the property lawsuit, or both." "Did you give him anything?" "I gave him coffee and a goodbye." Jenna exhaled something between a laugh and a prayer. "Okay, so they're getting desperate. That's good. Desperate people make mistakes." "Jenna, he tried to take Sophie out of the house, into town, alone." Another silence, longer this time. "We need to move faster." "I know. How soon can you drive to Fayetteville?" Elena looked at the monitor. The driveway was empty. The tree line was still. Sophie was upstairs. Safe, for now. "Tomorrow. I'll go tomorrow." She hung up, sat in the quiet kitchen. The coffee had gone cold. On the counter, her father's journal lay open to the last page, his shaky handwriting catching the late afternoon light. She is her mother's daughter. She doesn't let things go. Elena closed the journal, held it against her chest for a long moment, then set it down and started planning. The plan was simple, which should have been the first warning, because nothing about Elena Carter's life had been simple since the night a dead man's Bible cracked open on her apartment floor. 3 copies of the USB drive. That was the plan. Jenna made them on her cracked laptop using a pack of flash drives she'd bought at a gas station 2 counties over. Paid cash. Told no one. Copy 1 goes to the editor of the Arkansas Ledger in Little Rock, a statewide newspaper with no ties to Benton County. Jenna had a contact there, a former colleague who owed her a favor and still had enough backbone to print something that mattered. Copy 2 goes directly to Special Agent Dawson at the FBI field office in Fayetteville. Hand-delivered, not mailed, not emailed, because every electronic communication in Benton County ran through infrastructure that Ashford either owned or could access, and every package that left the local post office passed through a sorting facility overseen by a postmaster who played golf with Deputy Briggs every Saturday. Copy 3. Elena keeps insurance. The problem was getting out of the county. Briggs had eyes everywhere. Not sophisticated surveillance, just small-town awareness weaponized by a corrupt man in a badge. The gas station attendant who noticed which direction your car was heading. The farmer on Route 12 who called the deputy when an unfamiliar vehicle passed his fence. The volunteer fire department scanner that picked up radio chatter about movement on the roads after dark. In a town this small, leaving was an announcement. "I'll drive to Fayetteville myself," Elena said. They were sitting at her kitchen table, coffee mugs, the USB drives lined up between them. "Take the highway. Drive fast. Be there before Briggs even knows I'm gone." Jenna shook her head. "He'll know. The moment your car passes the gas station on Route 7, Donnie at the pump will call it in. You'll have a tail before you hit the county line." "So what do we do?" Jenna looked at her. Then she looked at the third chair at the table, the one Ruth was sitting in. Quiet. Hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee, listening the way she always listened, with her whole body still and her eyes missing nothing. "We need a distraction," Jenna said. "Something that pulls Briggs' attention in the opposite direction while Elena drives north. I'll file a motion at the county courthouse tomorrow morning, an emergency injunction against the Ashford lawsuit. I'll name Briggs as a co-conspirator, allege conflict of interest, demand a recusal hearing. It's legally meaningless. It'll get thrown out in a day. But for about 4 hours, every attorney and every deputy in this county will be in that courtroom dealing with me." Elena nodded. "That gives me a window. A small one. 4 hours, maybe 5. Fayetteville is 90 minutes each way. You'll have to drive straight there, find Dawson, hand him the drive, and get back before anyone realizes you are gone." "What about Sophie?" Both women looked at Ruth. The old woman set down her coffee, straightened in her chair, and for a moment, Elena saw something in Ruth Holloway's face that she hadn't seen before. Not just kindness, not just stubbornness, but something deeper, something that looked like a debt being paid. "Sophie stays with me," Ruth said. Firm, no hesitation. "I'll take her to my place. We'll bake cookies, feed the chickens. She won't even know you're gone." "Ruth, if something goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. Because your daddy asked me to do one thing before he died. He said, 'Ruth, if my girl comes, keep her safe.' I told him I would. And I don't break promises, not to the living, and sure as hell not to the dead." Elena stared at this woman 72 years old, arthritic hands a truck that burned oil, who had lost her husband to the same man who killed Elena's father, who had every reason to be afraid, and was sitting at this table anyway. "Okay," Elena said. "Okay," Ruth said. "Tomorrow," Jenna said. "Tomorrow." Elena couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her father's bed, staring at the ceiling while the house creaked around her, settling and breathing the way old houses do when they're keeping watch. Sophie was asleep down the hall. Elena had checked on her 3 times, watched her breathe, adjusted the blanket, moved General Biscuit from under her back to under her arm. She thought about her mother, Margaret, who had been brave enough to walk into a county office with a stack of evidence, who had believed that telling the truth was worth the risk, who had been wrong about that, and right about it at the same time. She thought about her father, Henry, who had spent 29 years living with the knowledge that his wife's courage had gotten her erased, who had chosen a different path, not confrontation, not bravery in the way the world usually defines it, but patience and silence and the slow, meticulous accumulation of evidence hidden in basements and Bibles. The quiet heroism of a man who knew he couldn't win by fighting, so he built a case instead. 2 different kinds of courage, 2 different costs, and now their daughter was lying in their bed trying to decide which kind she was. She fell asleep around 2 a.m. and dreamed of her mother's hands making pancakes in the shape of elephants. Morning, Tuesday, 6:47 a.m. Elena drove Sophie to Ruth's place a mile down the ridge, a small cabin with a tin roof and a porch that sagged on one end. Chickens pecked at the gravel driveway. A wind chime made of old spoons clinked in the morning breeze. Sophie climbed out, clutching General Biscuit and a coloring book. "Mommy, why am I going to Miss Ruth's house?" "Because Mommy has to run an errand, and Miss Ruth is going to teach you how to make cookies." "What kind?" "Whatever kind you want." Sophie considered this with the gravity of someone negotiating international trade agreements. "Chocolate chip. Deal." Ruth appeared on the porch, apron already on, flour on her hands. Elena walked Sophie to the door, knelt down, held her daughter's face between her palms, studying every freckle, every eyelash, every detail of this small, perfect face that she had somehow been entrusted with. "I love you, baby. I'll be back before dinner. Promise. Promise." She stood up, looked at Ruth. The old woman nodded, once the kind of nod that carries the weight of everything that needs to be said without wasting a syllable on any of it. Elena got back in the car and pulled onto the road. She did not look in the rearview mirror, because if she did, she would turn around. Jenna was already at the courthouse by 8 a.m. Elena knew, because Jenna texted a single word: filed. Elena turned north onto Route 7 toward Fayetteville. The USB drive was in an envelope inside her purse on the passenger seat. She drove 5 miles per hour under the speed limit. Nothing conspicuous, nothing hurried, just a woman running errands on a Tuesday morning. She passed the gas station. Donnie was at the pump. He looked up as her car went by, and she saw him reach for his phone. "Clock starts now." 45 minutes of clean highway, rolling hills, farmland, the Ozarks opening up around her green ridges against a pale blue sky. Elena gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2 checked the mirrors every 30 seconds. No tail, no cruiser, nothing. She let herself breathe, which was a mistake, because she was exactly 22 miles from the Fayetteville exit when the silver sedan appeared. It came from a side road, pulled out behind her, not aggressively, not with sirens or flashing lights, just appeared, materialized, as though it had been parked on that shoulder for hours, waiting for exactly this car, on exactly this road. Marcus. Behind the sedan, a black pickup, tinted windows, 2 men in the cab she didn't recognize. Her stomach dropped, not surprised she had known this was a possibility. Jenna had warned her. Ruth had warned her. She had warned herself at 2 a.m. while staring at the ceiling. But knowing something might happen and watching it happen in your rearview mirror are 2 entirely different experiences. Marcus accelerated, drew alongside her on the 2-lane road, honked, gestured for her to pull over. Elena kept driving, eyes forward, hands steady, heart detonating. The black pickup moved in front of her and slowed down, forcing her to brake. Marcus pulled up on her left. The shoulder dropped off into a drainage ditch on her right. Boxed in. The pickup braked hard. Elena swerved right. The Civic's tires hit gravel, then dirt, then the shallow ditch. The car lurched, tilted, and stopped. Engine still running, but going nowhere. Marcus was out of his car before Elena could put it in park. He jogged over with 2 men from the pickup behind him. They weren't armed, at least not visibly, but they were large and standing close. Marcus rapped on her window. That smile. That goddamn smile. Elena, come on, roll down the window. Let's talk about this like adults. She didn't roll down the window. She locked the doors, stared straight ahead. Elena. His voice shifted, sharper. Ashford wants the documents. You know that. I know that. This doesn't have to be ugly. Give me the drive. I'll tell him you cooperated. He'll drop the lawsuit. You keep the house. Sophie stays with you. Everybody wins. Everybody wins. 2 words that have never once in human history meant what they pretend to mean. One of the men walked to the passenger side, tried the handle, locked. He looked at Marcus. Marcus nodded. The man pulled a slim gem from his back pocket, slid it between the window and the door frame. 3 seconds later, the passenger lock popped. He reached across the seat, grabbed Elena's purse. She lunged for it, caught the strap, but the man was stronger. He yanked it free. Marcus took the purse, opened it, pulled out the envelope, tore it open. The USB drive, small, silver. He held it up to the morning light, smiled wider. See? That wasn't so hard. He tossed the purse back through the open door, tapped the roof of the car twice. Go home, Elena. It's over. He walked back to his sedan. The 2 men climbed into the pickup. Both vehicles pulled away, heading south, back toward Bentonville, back toward Ashford. Elena sat in the tilted Civic, hands on the wheel, breathing. Then she reached under the driver's seat and pulled out her phone. 1 text, sent at 6:52 a.m. that morning before she'd even left Ruth's house. To Jenna, Plan B is active. Ruth has the real one. Here's the thing about a 72-year-old woman in a faded blue pickup truck. Nobody notices her. Nobody follows her. Nobody calls the deputy when her truck rumbles past. Nobody thinks twice when she takes the old farm road north, the one that winds through 3 miles of pasture and connects to the state highway near Gravette. The road that isn't on any GPS. The road that only locals who've lived here for 50 years even know exists. Ruth Holloway left her cabin at 5:30 a.m., 2 hours before Elena dropped off Sophie, while it was still dark, while Donnie at the gas station was still asleep, while Deputy Briggs was eating breakfast at the diner he ate at every single morning. She drove north, slow, no headlights until she hit the state road. The real USB drive, the original, the one with 40 years of Henry Carter's meticulous evidence, was wrapped in a dish towel inside a Tupperware container on the passenger seat, next to a basket of fresh eggs, because if anyone stopped her, and no one would, But if they did, she was just an old woman delivering eggs to her sister in Fayetteville. She arrived at the FBI field office at 9:15 a.m., parked in the visitor's lot, walked through the front door, set the Tupperware container on the reception desk. "I need to speak to Special Agent Dawson," she said. "Tell him it's about Henry Carter. Tell him the package he's been waiting for is here." The receptionist made a call. 4 minutes later, a man appeared tall, late 40s dark windbreaker badge on his belt. He had a face that was trained not to show surprise, but showed it anyway just for a second. "Ma'am, I'm Agent Dawson. You said this is about Henry Carter." "Henry was my neighbor. He died 6 months ago, but I think you already know that." Dawson's jaw tightened. "I do." Ruth handed him the Tupperware. He opened it, unwrapped the dish towel, saw the USB drive. "His daughter found this in the farmhouse. It's everything, the financial records, the transaction chains, the pension theft, the environmental contamination. Everything Henry spent 40 years putting together." Dawson stared at the drive, then at Ruth. His professional composure cracked just enough to show something underneath that looked like grief. "We lost contact with Henry 4 months before he died. We thought he'd gone dark or that Ashford had gotten to him. We didn't know about the daughter." "Well, now you do, and Ashford knows too. He's got a lawsuit, a dirty deputy, and he just sent her ex-husband to intercept her on Route 7 about an hour ago." "Is she safe?" "She's safe, but she won't be for long. Ashford is going to figure out real quick that the drive his boy stole is a fake. And when he does, he's going straight to that farmhouse to destroy whatever's left." Dawson was already moving, already reaching for his radio. "How long do we have?" Ruth looked at him. Steady. Calm. "A few hours, maybe less. Depends on how fast that snake figures out he's been bit." Ruth drove back to her cabin after that. Slow. The same back roads. Arrived home just before Elena came to pick up Sophie. She didn't mention Fayetteville. Didn't mention Dawson. Just handed Sophie a bag of cookies and watched them drive up the hill toward the farmhouse. Then she sat on her porch and waited for whatever came next. Elena made it back to the farmhouse by noon. She took the long way, back roads, dirt paths, routes her father had marked on the old map in pencil. Sophie had flour on her nose and chocolate on her chin, and was holding a Ziploc bag of misshapen cookies that she declared were the best cookies in the entire world. "Miss Ruth let me crack the eggs, Mommy. I only dropped one. That's pretty good, baby. She said I'm a natural. What's a natural? It means you're good at something without trying. I'm a natural at cookies. You are." Back at the farmhouse, Elena locked every door and checked the monitors. Then she waited. She knew what was coming. She'd known since the moment she saw Marcus hold up that decoy drive with his triumphant little smile. He would take it to Ashford. Ashford would plug it in. Find nothing but a folder of recipes Jenna had downloaded from a cooking website. And then Victor Ashford would come to Ridgewood Hollow himself. Because this was no longer a business transaction, no longer a real estate dispute or a lawsuit or a calculated chess game. This was personal. Elena had outsmarted him. A 34-year-old broke single mother with a rusted Honda Civic had made a fool of the most powerful man in Benton County. And men like Ashford don't absorb humiliation. They retaliate. He would come for the servers in the basement, the original hard drives, the surveillance equipment that contained backup copies of everything Henry had compiled. He would come to burn it all. Elena had maybe 6 hours, maybe less. She texted Jenna. Back home, Ruth delivered. They took the decoy. Ashford will figure it out soon. Jenna's reply came fast. Courthouse is chaos. Briggs is here arguing the motion. But he'll leave when Ashford calls. Be ready. Be ready. Elena walked through the house, her father's house, the house he'd built to be a fortress. Steel doors, reinforced windows, camera system with backup generators, and the lockdown mechanism. Not a magic button connected to the FBI. Nothing that dramatic. A heavy-duty electromagnetic lock system wired to every steel door and window shutter in the house. When activated, every entry point sealed simultaneously, industrial grade, the kind of system used in secure government facilities and high-end panic rooms. Her father had installed it himself. The wiring was meticulous color-coded, labeled in his angular handwriting. There was a control panel in the basement and a secondary switch accessible through an app on the desktop computer, both requiring a 4-digit code. Her birthday. Of course. The lockdown wouldn't call anyone. It wouldn't summon help. It would simply turn the farmhouse into a sealed box. Anyone inside stays inside. Anyone outside stays outside until someone manually overrides the system. Elena tested it once, typed the code. Every steel shutter in the house slammed shut with a concussive boom that made Sophie shriek from the living room. "It's okay, baby. Just testing the locks." "Those are really loud locks, Mommy." "They are." She disarmed the system, made Sophie dinner mac and cheese from a box the orange kind. Sophie ate at the kitchen table while narrating a complex story about General Biscuit's ongoing conflict with an imaginary dragon named Stephen. Elena listened, smiled, nodded at the appropriate moments, and watched the security monitors mounted above the kitchen doorframe. Empty driveway, empty pasture, empty tree line. Not for long. They came at 9 p.m. Sophie was asleep upstairs. Elena was in the kitchen with one monitor showing the driveway and one showing the front gate. The headlights appeared first. 2 sets, moving fast through the trees, not the cautious approach of someone being careful, the aggressive speed of someone who was done being careful. Elena stood up. Her hands were shaking. She let them shake, because her legs were steady and her mind was clear. 2 vehicles, a black SUV and behind it a dark sedan. They blew through the front gate. She'd left it unlocked, deliberately. Didn't want broken metal blocking the driveway when the FBI arrived. If the FBI arrived. If Ruth had made it. If Dawson was real. If everything her father had built and planned and sacrificed for actually worked. A lot of ifs for a woman with a sleeping child upstairs. 4 men exited the SUV. Dark-clothes tactical flashlights, not uniformed, not police, private security, Ashford's personal team, and from the sedan, 2 figures. Victor Ashford still in his suit, but the jacket was off sleeves rolled up, the polished gentleman act discarded. He looked like what he actually was, a man who had come to destroy evidence and didn't care who saw. And Marcus. Of course, standing slightly behind Ashford, arms crossed, the loyal dog waiting for instructions. Elena watched them on the monitor, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. Ashford walked to the front door, tried the handle, locked. He turned to one of his men and nodded. The man produced a battery-powered angle grinder, pressed it against the steel doorframe. Sparks erupted into the night. Elena moved, fast. She ran upstairs, scooped Sophie out of bed. The girl woke up, confused, groggy. "Mommy?" "We need to go to the special room, baby. Remember the closet I showed you? The one with the thick walls?" The panic room. A reinforced interior closet on the 2nd floor with steel-lined walls, ventilation, and a lock that engaged from the inside. Her father had stocked it with water bottles, granola bars, a flashlight, and a blanket. She carried Sophie inside, set her down on the blanket, gave her General Biscuit. "I need you to stay here, baby. Don't come out until I come get you." "Okay." "Mommy, I'm scared." "I know. I'm a little scared too. But we're going to be okay." "Like a pinky promise." Elena extended her pinky. Sophie wrapped her tiny finger around it. Squeezed. Elena closed the panic room door and heard the lock engage, thick, solid. The door was flush with the wall from the outside, painted to match, no visible handle. Her father had designed it that way. Nothing was getting through, and no one was finding it unless they already knew it was there. She ran back downstairs. The grinding sound was louder now. They were almost through the doorframe. Elena descended into the basement, past the monitors, past the desk where the briefcase used to sit. She'd already emptied it and hidden the cash in 3 separate locations around the property. She went straight to the control panel, the electromagnetic lockdown switch. A simple keypad, A simple code. She didn't type it yet, because if she sealed the house now, she'd be locked inside too with 4 armed men, and Victor Ashford cutting through her front door. She needed them in the basement, specifically down here, where the servers were, where they thought the evidence was stored, where the concrete walls and single entry point would turn this room into a cage the moment the steel fire door at the top of the stairs engaged. She needed to be bait. Elena turned on the basement lights, let the blue glow of the monitors flood the room. Then she positioned herself near the back wall behind the server racks, where a heavy reinforced storm cellar door led out to the back pasture, her father's escape route. She had tested it that afternoon. The bolts were oiled, the hinges silent. It opened to concrete steps that emerged behind the east barn, hidden by overgrown brush. She waited. The grinding stopped. A metallic crash, the front door giving way. Heavy footsteps on the hardwood above. Multiple sets, moving fast, spreading through the house. "She's not up here." One of the security men, voice muffled by the floor. "Check the basement." Ashford's voice, tight, controlled, but underneath the control, a vibrating fury that Elena could feel through the floorboards. The oak door at the top of the stairs opened. A flashlight beam cut down through the darkness, swept across the concrete floor, found the monitors and the desk. "Down here. Equipment computers, looks like a whole server setup." Ashford's footsteps coming down the stairs, slow, deliberate. Then Marcus behind him, lighter, quicker, the footfall of a man who always followed someone more powerful. They reached the bottom. Ashford scanned the basement, his eyes cataloging the servers, the monitors, the hard drives, the filing cabinets. "Get the drives," he said to his men. "Pull every hard drive, every backup, box it. We'll dispose of it off-site." He walked to the desk, saw the empty briefcase. His jaw clenched. "Where's the money?" "She must have moved it." Marcus, nervous, fidgeting. "Find it. Check the house. Every room, every closet." 2 of the 4 security men turned and headed back up the stairs. 2 remained in the basement, plus Ashford, plus Marcus. 4 total. And Elena, behind the server rack, holding her phone with the lockdown app open. 1 button, 1 code. She waited until the 2 men upstairs were far enough from the basement door she could hear them on the second floor opening closets, pulling furniture aside. They wouldn't find the panic room. The door was invisible. Now, Elena typed the code, 0824, and pressed confirm. The sound was enormous. Every steel shutter in the house slamming shut simultaneously. A cascading series of metallic booms that echoed through the structure. Windows, doors, vents, everything sealing at once. And at the top of the basement stairs, the electromagnetic lock engaged on the steel fire door, recessed into the ceiling, hidden in a housing that looked like an ordinary beam. It dropped 300 pounds of reinforced steel, crashing down across the doorframe with a force that shook dust from the ceiling. The basement was sealed. Ashford spun around, and for the first time since Elena had met him, genuine fear broke through the surface of his face. What the hell was that? Marcus ran to the stairs, slammed his palms against the steel door, pushed. Nothing. Not a millimeter. "It's locked. There's a door. It dropped from the ceiling. I can't." "Break it down." "It's steel. Solid steel. I can't break steel, Victor." Ashford turned slowly, scanning the basement, his eyes searching the shadows. "Elena." His voice quiet now. "Careful. I know you're in here." She didn't answer. She was already at the storm cellar door, sliding the bolts smooth and silent, because her father had oiled these hinges for exactly this moment. "Elena, this is pointless. My men are upstairs. They'll override the system." "No, they won't. The override requires the same code, and they don't have it." She pushed the cellar door open. Cool night air rushed in pine and wet grass and freedom. "Elena." She stepped through, climbed the concrete stairs, emerged behind the east barn into an enormous night sky dense with stars. She locked the storm cellar door from the outside with a padlock her father had left hanging on a nail beside the exit. Ready, waiting, like everything else in this house. Then she ran, around the barn, across the yard, past the SUV and sedan parked at angles in front of the ruined front door, to her Civic. She didn't go inside the house. Didn't need to. Sophie was in the panic room behind a steel door with water and food and a stuffed rabbit. The men upstairs couldn't find the room, couldn't breach it even if they did, and the men downstairs weren't going anywhere. Elena started the engine and drove down the driveway. Not toward town, not toward the highway. Toward Ruth's cabin 1 mile down the ridge where she would wait, where she would hold her breath, and where she would find out if a 72-year-old woman in a pickup truck had kept her promise to a dead man. The headlights appeared 47 minutes later, not from the south, from the north. Multiple vehicles moving in formation fast, but controlled the kind of coordinated movement that doesn't come from civilians. Elena stood on Ruth's porch watching. Ruth beside her. Both of them silent. The vehicles turned onto the ridge road. 3 dark SUVs with federal plates. Blue and red lights mounted on the dashboards flashing without sirens. Behind them, 2 unmarked sedans and a mobile command vehicle. They passed Ruth's cabin and headed up the road toward Ridgewood Hollow, toward the farmhouse where Victor Ashford was currently locked in a concrete basement, screaming at walls that didn't care. Elena watched them go. Then she sat down on the porch steps and put her face in her hands. Ruth sat down next to her, put an arm around her shoulders, didn't say anything, just held her the way you hold someone who has been carrying something impossibly heavy for too long and has finally set it down. Agent Dawson called 2 hours later. Ms. Carter, the property is secure. We've taken 5 individuals into custody, including Victor Ashford and Marcus Webb. We've recovered the server equipment and hard drives from the basement, and we have the USB drive that Mrs. Holloway delivered this morning. Sophie, Elena said, my daughter is in the panic room, 2nd floor. We found her. She's safe. She's asking for someone named General Biscuit. Elena laughed, or cried. She wasn't sure which. They sounded the same. I'll bring her General Biscuit. Ms. Carter, I'd like to speak with you in person. Can you come to the property? I'm on my way. The farmhouse looked like a crime scene, which technically it was. Federal vehicles lined the driveway. Agents moved through the house with evidence bags and cameras. The front door hung at an angle where Ashford's men had cut through it, the porch boards scorched from angle grinder sparks. But the house stood. Steel shutters still engaged on every window. The lockdown system still active. Her father's fortress had held. Elena found Sophie in the living room, sitting on the leather couch wrapped in a shock blanket, eating a granola bar an agent had given her. General Biscuit was not with her, but she didn't seem traumatized. She seemed curious. Mommy, there are police people everywhere. They have really cool flashlights. Elena picked her up and held her tight enough that Sophie squeaked. Mommy, you're squishing me. I know. I'm going to squish you for a while. Okay. Agent Dawson approached. He looked tired, the deep kind, the kind that accumulates over years of building a case, years of waiting for evidence, years of losing witnesses. Can we talk? He asked, gesturing toward the porch. They sat on the steps, the same steps Elena had climbed the first night she arrived, when the keypad flashed green and the bolt slid back, and she realized her father had been waiting for her all along. Your father was one of the most important confidential informants we've ever worked with, Dawson said. He first contacted our office in 2003 after his wife disappeared. Elena's chest tightened. You knew about my mother. We investigated. We couldn't prove anything. Ashford's network was too insulated at the time. Your father understood that. And instead of giving up, he spent the next 20 years building the case himself. Dawson paused and rubbed his face with both hands, the gesture of a man confronting the weight of what he was about to say. He wasn't alone at first. There were 3 informants inside Ashford's network. Your father, a mine foreman named William Prescott, and an accountant named Douglas Vance. Both Prescott and Vance died in separate incidents, 2009 and 2015, that we believe were orchestrated but could never prove. After Vance died, your father went completely dark. He stopped all contact with our office. We thought he'd been compromised. He looked at the house, the steel shutters, the cameras. He hadn't given up. He'd gone underground, built this place, installed the surveillance system, transferred the evidence to encrypted drives, and set up a contingency plan in case he didn't survive long enough to deliver it himself. "The Bible," Elena said. Dawson nodded. "He told me once, years ago, before he went dark, if anything happens to me, my daughter will find it. I asked him how he could be so sure. He said, because she's her mother's daughter." Elena pressed her palms against her eyes, breathed in, breathed out. Let the words settle into the place inside her where she kept everything about her parents, the love and the loss and the silence, and now, finally, the understanding. The evidence your father compiled, combined with what Mrs. Holloway delivered, is the most comprehensive case file we've ever received on a domestic corruption operation. 43 counts of pension fraud, environmental contamination across 6 townships, money laundering through 17 shell companies, and 3 suspected homicides, Prescott Vance and your father. The blood panel he commissioned confirms chronic arsenic poisoning. We've already opened a murder investigation. Elena looked out of the pasture. Dark now, but she could hear the grass moving in the wind, that sound that had made her chest ache the first time she heard it. She understood it now. It wasn't the sound of beauty she hadn't earned. It was the sound of everything her father had fought for, every year of silence, every tax payment, every photograph taken from 600 miles away, every night spent in a factory, while his real life's work sat locked in a basement in the Ozarks. "What happens now?" she asked. "Ashford, Webb, and Briggs will be arraigned within 72 hours. The pension fraud case alone carries a minimum of 30 years. With the murder charges, Ashford isn't going home. And the land, yours. Clear title, no liens, no competing claims." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And Ms. Carter, the lithium deposit your father identified in his geological surveys. The preliminary estimates from our environmental team indicate it's one of the largest undeveloped lithium reserves in the continental United States, worth well over $100 million. Your father secured the mineral rights when he bought the property in 1982. Those rights belong to you. $100 million. Sitting under the grass her father mowed every time he drove down from Chicago, under the pasture where her daughter had chased fireflies 2 nights ago, Elena didn't react to the number. Numbers were abstract. What mattered was concrete. Sophie, the house, the 43 families whose pensions had been stolen. "The pension fund," she said. "The 43 families. Is there any way to recover their money?" Dawson looked surprised. "Just for a moment. The federal case will include restitution orders, but the recovery process is long and complex. Could take years." Elena nodded. "I'll need a lawyer, a real one, not from this county. I can recommend someone." "Good, because I have plans for that lithium money, and they start with 43 families who are owed a retirement they never got." Dawn. The federal vehicles were gone. The evidence collected. The agents departed. The house was quiet again. The lockdown system disarmed the steel shutters, retracted, and morning light poured through windows that hadn't seen the sun in hours. Elena sat on the back porch watching the sky turn from black to purple to pink to gold over the ridgeline. Sophie was asleep inside on the leather couch. General Biscuit recovered from behind a bookshelf where she'd hidden him when the loud noises started, now tucked firmly under her arm, his remaining ear pressed flat against her cheek. Ruth pulled up the driveway at 6:30 a.m., carrying a thermos of coffee and a plate of biscuits wrapped in a dish towel. Because that's what Ruth did. That's what Ruth would always do. She sat down next to Elena, poured 2 cups, handed one over. They sat in silence for a while, watching the light change. The morning birds started up a cardinal on the fence post, a mockingbird, somewhere in the oaks, the chickadees in the barn eaves chattering about everything and nothing. "You did it," Ruth said finally. "We did it." "Your daddy would be proud." "I think he'd be relieved." Ruth smiled. The first real smile Elena had seen on her face. Not big, not dramatic, just a small shift in the landscape of a face that had spent too many years holding grief. "Earl, too," Ruth said quietly, almost to herself. "Earl, too." They drank their coffee and watched the light grow stronger, and neither of them felt the need to fill the silence with words, because the silence itself was enough, the silence of two women sitting on a porch in the Ozark Mountains on a morning when justice had finally arrived late and imperfect, but arrived all the same. A car turned up the ridge road below. Elena recognized it. Jenna's battered hatchback, the one with the cracked headlight and the bumper sticker she'd never bothered to remove. Jenna parked behind Ruth's truck, got out, and stood in the driveway for a moment, looking up at the farmhouse with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Then she climbed the porch steps and Ruth handed her a cup of coffee without being asked, and Jenna sat down on Elena's other side, and nobody said anything for a while. Three women, one who had been silenced, one who had been kept in the dark, one who had been waiting, sitting together on the porch of a house built by a man who believed that someday the truth would matter. Elena went inside and picked up her father's Bible from the kitchen table, the one with the broken spine, the one that had started everything. She carried it out to the porch and opened it. Not to the hiding place, which was empty now, but to the pages themselves, the scripture her father had read every night for 30 years. And there, in the margin of a page in Psalms in pencil so faint, she almost missed it, her father's handwriting. "The only thing I am afraid of is not death. It is that my daughter will grow up believing her father was a coward." Elena closed the Bible and pressed it against her chest the way she used to press her face against his flannel shirt when she was small, and the world was loud and he was the only quiet place she knew. She looked at the pasture morning light turning the grass to gold, the ridgeline dark against the brightening sky, and past the pasture the tree line where Ruth had appeared that first night, not a ghost, not a stranger, but a promise kept. "No, Dad," Elena whispered, her voice steady, her eyes clear. "I never thought that. Not once." Sophie appeared at the screen door, hair messy, eyes half closed, General Biscuit dangling from one hand. "Mommy, is it morning?" "Yeah, baby, it's morning." "Are we staying?" Elena looked at the house her father built with steel and secrets, and 40 years of silent, ferocious love. She looked at Ruth, who was pouring more coffee, at Jenna, who was already pulling out her phone to call her editor in Little Rock, at the pasture beyond where the grass was turning to gold and the air smelled like pine and coffee and the first day of something new. "Yeah, baby, we're staying." Sophie pushed through the screen door, padded across the porch in bare feet, and climbed into Elena's lap, leaned her head against her mother's chest. "Good," Sophie said, "because Miss Ruth promised me we could get chickens." Elena laughed, a real laugh, the kind that starts deep and rises through your whole body and comes out sounding like someone who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has finally let go. The sun cleared the ridge, light flooded the pasture, the grass turned to gold, and Ridgewood Hollow, the 45 acres of timber and pasture that a quiet man bought in 1982 to protect a world he would never live to see, stood exactly as he'd built it, strong, fortified, home.